Hello students, this is the third video we are watching about making of a global world. In the first one we have seen the pre-modern world globalization, how people were going from nation to nation through Silk Route, the kind of people, those who were traveling from nation to nation and what they were carrying and how food traveled from place to place. Then how America was conquered and what was the benefit of conquering of America to the European nations and how World Trade Center transformed from east to west. So these are the things we had seen in the first video. In the second video, in the 19th century, how technological development fostered the globalization and Rinderpest in Africa, how it affected the lives of the people of Africa and condition of indentured labor and devastating First World War and impact of the First World War and Great Depression, mass production and role of India in Great Depression. So these are all the things we had seen. Now we are discussing about the third part of this content, that is rebuilding of world economy. After the Great Depression, there was a need for rebuilding the economy of the world. So in this part, we are discussing the post-war reconstruction, Bretton Woods system, and after the downfall of Bretton Woods system, globalization even improved a lot. So these are the things we have to discuss now. Second World War was fought between 1939 to 45. Second World War broke out after 2 decades of First World War, and it was fought between two groups. One is Axis power, consisting of Germany, Japan, and Italy, and Allied power, Britain, France, and Soviet Union, and later US joined. America initially was neutral, and then it joined Second World War. So these are the two powers which started Second World War. The Second World War was unlike in earlier wars. Most of the deaths took place outside the battlefield, and civilians died more than soldiers. And two crucial influences shaped post-war reconstruction. The first was US emergence as the dominant economic, political, and military power in the Western world. After World War, world understood, learned two lessons. The first one is industrial society based on mass production can't be sustained without mass consumption. So the nations started mass production, but it was lacking of mass consumption. So that resulted in fluctuations in price and employment and so on. This is the first lesson they have learned, the world learned. And second one, the fluctuations in price, output, employment should be regularized or stabilized. For this, for economic stability, can be achieved with the intervention of the government. So earlier, previous years of World War, economists they thought that government intervention should not be there in the economy. But now they have understood economic intervention should be there of the government. Otherwise, we can't stabilize the employment, price, output fluctuations. To achieve this, the Bretton Woods Conference established International Monetary Fund (IMF) to deal with external surplus and deficits of its member nation. And the other one is the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, popularly known as World Bank. These were set up to finance post-war reconstruction. The international monetary system is the system linking national currencies and monetary system. The Bretton Woods system was based on fixed exchange rate. When the Second World War ended, most of the Asian and African countries were the colonies of various European nations, and they were given independence after the Second World War, even though political independence was not a useful thing unless they have become economically independent. So political independence is not great than economic independence. So their economies and societies were handicapped by long periods of colonial rule. The other hand, IMF and World Bank were designed to meet the financial needs of industrial countries, not for developing countries like India. Most of the developing countries did not get benefit from the fast growth of Western economies experienced in 1950s and 60s because IMF and IBRD were designed to assist industrial countries, not agricultural countries like India. Therefore, they organized themselves. Developing countries organize themselves as a group. For example, Group of 77, G77, and the concept of NIEO, New International Economic Order, started. So the main intention of creating these organizations is to help themselves. Themselves means here the developing countries. Developing countries started mutual cooperation among them rather than depending upon IMF and IBRD, and they experienced that they could not be uh, the financial institution that helped them to come out of various problems like unemployment, food problem, poverty, and so on. From 1960s, the rising cost of overseas involvement that weakened US finance and competitive strength. This eventually led the collapse of the system of fixed exchange rates and the introduction of system of floating exchange rate. Before 1960s, currencies were pegged to gold. US currency was pegged to gold. But now, as US lost its competitiveness and overseas involvements weakened US and it could not maintain its currency value with the gold. That's why now floating exchange rate started. Floating means, the currency value changes according to market values or market forces like supply and demand. So now currency values are determined by demand and supply of the currency or demand of the currency of any particular nation. The other important thing is industrial world was also hit by unemployment that began rising from mid 1970s and remained high until the early 1990s. From the late 1970s, multinational companies, MNCs, also began to shift production from European nations to low-wage Asian countries. Wages were relatively low in countries like China. Thus, they became attractive destinations for investment by foreign MNCs, competing to capture world market. As MNCs, they started moving towards Asian countries. Now, China, India, Brazil have become um, a very good destination for MNCs to invest more. So in this video, students, we have understood the rebuilding of world economy. After Second World War, many efforts were made to rebuild the economy, which was devastated from First and Second World War, and it was regarded as a solution for the economy, which was suffered from mass production, and to balance between production and consumption. And the second one is Bretton Woods institution. Bretton Woods institutions, IMF and IBRD. IMF, International Monetary Fund, and IBRD, International Bank for Reconstruction and Development was established to provide financial support for various nations which were suffered a lot from the world wars. But already you have known by this video that these institutions, financial institutions, did not support the developing countries, agrarian countries like India. And end of Bretton Woods. So in Bretton Woods system, the currency values were pegged to, fixed to the value of gold. But now currencies of various countries could not maintain their values with gold. That's why it has left to the market forces. That is what we call floating exchange rate. So that is what we call end of Bretton Woods system and the beginning of the globalization. So these are all the things we have seen in this video. So by this video, this chapter ends. So that is making of a global world. That's all from this chapter. Thank you all.